I started sleeping more peacefully, taking walks without my phone. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in months. For the first time in years, I began to breathe. And all the while, Maya thought her silence was working. She had no idea the real silence was just beginning. It was a Thursday when it truly sank in, how much space silence could take up in a room. Maya hadn't spoken to me in nearly a week, not in any meaningful way. A few grunts here and there, maybe a passive comment about the groceries or the cat's litter box, but nothing that resembled a conversation. Nothing that connected two people who had once shared secrets under dim bedroom lights and laughed themselves breathless in the car at midnight. Her silence used to hurt. Now, it just echoed. She had weaponized it so often that I think she genuinely believed it still held the same power, that it would always draw the same response. But I wasn't pacing the floors anymore. I wasn't rehearsing apologies or trying to catch her eye over dinner. I wasn't lowering my voice or monitoring my tone like I was some ticking bomb waiting to offend her. I had started treating her silence for what it really was, avoidance dressed in control. That morning I woke up before sunrise. I sat at the edge of the bed and looked at her. She was curled under the blanket, her back to me, as if even in sleep she needed to be distant. I watched her breathing, slow and even, and I realized I no longer longed for her affection. I no longer missed her the way I used to. It was a shocking revelation, like discovering you've stopped bleeding without even noticing the wound had healed. Later that day, I took myself to lunch. Just me and a good book. I lingered over coffee, savoring the taste, watching the world go by from the cafe window. There was a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. I thought about texting her, not out of obligation but out of habit. Then I stopped. If I had to force a connection every time, then maybe it wasn't a real connection at all. When I got home that evening, she was in the living room scrolling on her phone, curled into her usual corner of the couch. She didn't look up, not a glance. I walked past her without saying a word and went into the bedroom. And you know what? It didn't feel petty. It didn't feel wrong. It felt like self-respect. That weekend, she posted a photo of herself alone at a rooftop bar, captioned "Vibes Only." That used to be a code. Her way of baiting me, posting cryptic captions so I'd question her whereabouts, her mood, her intentions. But this time, I didn't care enough to ask. I didn't check the comments. I didn't wonder who took the photo. I didn't take the bait. She noticed. Maya had always known exactly how to get under my skin. Not with words, but with the lack of them. When she wanted control, she didn't yell, didn't fight. She simply went quiet, withdrawn, eyes blank, lips sealed. And I would always come running, offering apologies for offenses I hadn't committed, trying to fill the silence with explanations, reassurances, warmth. She started lingering around me more, making small, empty gestures, leaving coffee on the counter for me in the morning, asking offhandedly if I'd watched our show without her. She even slipped in a "How was your day?" like we were suddenly still playing house. But the words were shallow. They didn't reach me. She didn't ask because she cared. She asked because she sensed something slipping. And it wasn't just my attention. It was my presence. You see, the breaking point wasn't some big blow-up. No dramatic shouting match or door slamming. It was quieter than that. It was me choosing not to respond. Me choosing peace over pretending. Me realizing that I didn't owe anyone my energy, especially not someone who only acknowledged my value when it was at risk of disappearing. And that's the part Maya never understood. She thought silence was a game. She thought ignoring someone meant they'd chase you harder, love you deeper, beg for scraps just to feel close again. But eventually, silence stops feeling mysterious. It stops feeling powerful. It just starts to feel empty. And once someone realizes they're chasing an echo, they stop running. That night, as we lay in the same bed but worlds apart, I stared at the ceiling and made the quietest, loudest decision of my life. I was done. Not just with the argument. Not just with the cycle. I was done with her silence dictating my self-worth. I was done with the push and pull, with the hope and the hollow aftermath. I was done letting someone else's emotional distance define my sense of connection. Maya still thought she held the reins, still believed that any day now I'd crack and come crawling back into her orbit. But something had shifted, not in her, in me. She knew the effect it had on me, that gnawing anxiety, the pit in my stomach, the relentless mental gymnastics, trying to decode what I did wrong. She fed off the power that silence gave her, made herself into a wall I'd repeatedly hurl myself against, hoping for a crack, a sign, anything. And the truth is, I let her. And once that change takes root, once you realize the peace of not needing what you used to beg for, there's no going back. The moment I truly decided to leave wasn't explosive. It wasn't even dramatic. It was ordinary. The kind of moment that would have passed unnoticed if I hadn't been paying attention. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, scrolling through news articles I barely cared about, and I looked up to see Maya walk past me without a word. No eye contact, no acknowledgement. She might as well have walked past a lamp. It struck me then, not her coldness, not her silence, but how numb I had become to it. Her emotional distance had once sliced deep. Now it barely grazed the surface. I didn't feel anger or sadness or even disappointment. I just felt done. Not in the I'm giving up kind of way, but in the this chapter is over kind of way. The kind that comes with a strange sense of calm, like a heavy door swinging shut behind you. That evening, while Maya was in the shower, I quietly opened the closet and pulled out a small travel bag. I didn't pack right away. I just stood there for a while, staring at it, feeling the weight of what it represented. This wasn't just about leaving the apartment. It was about leaving the cycle, leaving the version of myself I had become inside this emotionally manipulative space. Half-withered, constantly second-guessing, walking on eggshells. I wasn't running away. I was reclaiming something I had been handing over piece by piece for years. My peace, my dignity, my sense of self. Over the next few days, I began the process with methodical care. I quietly arranged for a short-term rental in a nearby neighborhood. Nothing flashy. Just a small apartment with a clean kitchen and windows that let in the morning light. I rerouted my mail, changed passwords, removed personal files from the shared computer. I moved cash into a separate account. Not out of spite, but to preserve independence. Every detail was thought through. Not because I was hiding, but because I didn't owe Maya a performance. I owed myself a clean exit. In those last days, I noticed subtle shifts in her. She became more talkative, though never quite genuine. Her attempts at casual intimacy, the quick touches, the nostalgic comments, felt more like strategic moves than real emotion. But I played along. I didn't want drama. I wanted a clean break, not a firestorm. One night, she came to bed and laid her head on my chest, like she used to during the early days of us. I didn't push her away, but I didn't embrace her either. I kept my arms at my sides, eyes on the ceiling, counting the seconds until the moment passed. It felt like a ghost of what once was, like we were both acting out a memory we no longer felt. By Friday, everything was in place. I left early that morning before she woke up. I didn't leave a note, not because I wanted to be cruel, but because anything I could have written would have sounded like justification. And I didn't need to justify peace. I took my bag, locked the door behind me, and walked away with nothing but the clothes on my back and a calm heart. Silence was her game. But I had mastered a different kind of silence, the kind that comes when you no longer need the last word, when you don't need to prove your pain or explain your choices. It was the silence of someone who had made a decision not in reaction, but in resolution. Until I didn't. That same afternoon she texted, "Where are you?" I didn't answer. Hours later, "Are you okay? What's going on?" I still didn't respond. Then came the calls. 8 in total, all ignored. Eventually, the voicemails started. The first few were concerned, then confused, then angry. By the 7th, her voice cracked, somewhere between rage and fear. The 8th was quiet, just breathing. And then nothing. I listened to none of them. Because here's the thing about disappearing. It's not about vanishing physically. It's about removing your energy from a place that no longer values it. It's about no longer feeding something that starves you in return. It's about choosing solitude over silent suffering. In the days that followed, I rediscovered the beauty of my own company. I cooked for myself, not for someone else's expectations. I played music at night and left the windows open. I walked the streets without checking my phone every 5 minutes. I slept through the night without waking up to the ache of being unloved. I didn't block her. I didn't need to. The real disconnect wasn't digital. It was emotional. And once that cord was cut, there was nothing left to reattach. I imagine Maya is still trying to understand what happened. How the man who once hung on her every word, who bent and broke to keep the peace, could simply go. No fight. No farewell. But that's the thing about people like Maya. They think silence is a weapon until they experience it as a boundary. They think ignoring someone is control until they're the ones being ignored. She thought my silence would always mean suffering. It started like every other time. A minor disagreement. Something about me forgetting to confirm dinner plans with her friends. She said nothing. No big confrontation. Just that cold shift in energy. The way she turned her body slightly away from me on the couch, how her replies became clipped, monotone, and eventually non-existent. I asked if she was okay. She gave me the dead stare. I tried again later. Still nothing. Now she knows it means freedom. In the beginning, Maya barely noticed my absence. She mistook it for one of my usual sulking episodes, the kind where I would go quiet for a day or two before crawling back with some emotionally charged message, hoping to reconnect. She'd seen that pattern before, me withdrawing, then circling back, still desperate to fix what she had broken with silence. She assumed this was no different. The first day passed and she didn't text again. She convinced herself I was probably out clearing my head, maybe staying at a friend's. By day 2, she started scrolling through my social media accounts, looking for any signs of life. Nothing had changed. No new posts, no reactions. Just the static existence of someone who had vanished without fanfare. It was on the third day that the gravity began to shift. The apartment felt colder, and the usual tension, the one she used to wield as control, had turned into something else entirely. Emptiness. Not a peaceful stillness, but a void. She realized my coffee mug was missing from the rack, my shoes weren't at the door, and the drawer that held my socks and t-shirts was completely empty. When she opened the bathroom cabinet and saw that even my shaving cream was gone, it finally registered. I hadn't stepped out, I had left. There was no note on the table, no final plea, no dramatic farewell, just absence, clean, complete, and resolute. She began calling again. Not out of love, though perhaps part of her still thought she loved me in the only way she knew how, but out of disbelief. Because this wasn't how the game was supposed to go. In her world, silence created imbalance. It kept her one step ahead, always forcing me to react, to compensate, to bleed for her attention. But now the script had flipped, and I wasn't playing my part anymore. The calls turned into longer voicemails. This time she didn't sound like the calm, collected version of herself, the woman who used to weaponize detachment. Her voice wavered. She apologized, though vaguely. She said she'd been going through a lot. She claimed she didn't mean to push me away. She suggested we talk, maybe meet somewhere neutral, just to clear the air. But every word reeked of panic disguised as care. For the first time, Maya was the one feeling uncertain. She stood in the very silence she had once used against me, and now it swallowed her whole. I spent the next 2 days trying to mend things, cooking her favorite meal, sending her morning texts with little hearts and sun emojis, checking in from work. No response, just seen. Seen at 9:12 a.m., seen at 1:46 p.m., seen, but never heard. She tried reaching out to mutual friends, hoping one of them had heard from me. But I hadn't told anyone. I didn't need an audience for my departure. There was no need to justify myself anymore. When people finally asked where I was, she had to admit she didn't know. And that, more than anything, shattered her image of control. It wasn't just that I was gone. It was that I hadn't asked for permission. I hadn't tried to make her understand. I hadn't even tried to be understood. I had simply chosen peace over explanation. One night, she sat alone on the couch, scrolling through old photos of us. Those perfectly filtered images that mask the quiet wars we fought behind closed doors. She lingered on one where we were laughing at the beach, the wind tugging her hair across her face while I held her close. It was from a time when I still believed our love could outlast the damage. But looking at it now, she saw something she'd never noticed before. The strain behind my eyes. The way my arm around her wasn't firm. It was clinging. Not from strength, but desperation. And for the first time in her life, Maya questioned whether she had ever truly loved me, or if she had only loved the power I gave her by loving her unconditionally. That's when the truth began to unravel in her mind, like threads pulled from an old sweater. She realized her silence hadn't been strength. It had been fear masquerading as dominance. The fear of vulnerability, of letting someone in too deeply, of facing herself in the mirror and seeing how little she offered back to someone who gave her everything. She thought ignoring me made her the strong one. But now she sat in a room echoing with the absence of someone who no longer needed her approval, her attention, or her affection. She wasn't used to that. Her past relationships had always come back around, either through apology or regret. I didn't. I simply stayed gone. She called again a week later. This time her voice was stripped bare. No condescension, no manipulation. She admitted she missed me, said she had taken things for granted, that maybe she didn't realize how much I'd meant to her until I wasn't there to hear it. But that was the point. I wasn't there. Not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I had crossed an invisible line inside myself, one that once marked devotion but now marked distance. And once you cross that line, you can't go back without betraying yourself. It was familiar, and yet this time it hit different. Maybe because I was tired. Not tired in the physical sense, but in the way your soul gets tired when you keep reaching for someone who's always pulling away. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror on the third night, toothbrush in hand, and really looked at myself. Not just my reflection, but the way my eyes had dulled, the constant tightness in my jaw, the tension in my chest that never fully left. I was a man trapped in a cycle of someone else's control, mistaking emotional hunger for love. Maya now sat with a silence she hadn't chosen, one that wasn't calculated but permanent. The kind of silence that doesn't beg for resolution. The kind that leaves you sitting in your own echo, knowing that the one person who always showed up finally walked away for good. Time has a funny way of stretching when you're waiting for something that's never coming. For Maya, the days that followed my departure blurred into a haze of unanswered questions, unread messages, and quiet rooms filled with too many memories. She kept expecting something. A return text, a knock at the door, even a bitter voicemail. But none of it came. The silence wasn't temporary this time. It was complete. Final. She tried reaching out again, not with anger now, but with that anxious urgency that people get when they realize too late that someone has truly moved on. Her words lost the edge they used to carry. They weren't laced with pride anymore. There was no effort to twist the story or justify the way she had treated me. It was simply, "Please talk to me," and "I didn't think you'd really leave." But I didn't respond. Not because I wanted revenge, and not to punish her. I didn't need to make her hurt to feel better. That would have meant I still needed something from her. An apology, a reaction, a resolution. But I didn't. What I had found in her absence was more powerful than any apology she could have given. Peace. Real, solid, healing peace. While Maya spiraled in the quiet she once weaponized, I was learning to enjoy the simple parts of life again. I woke up without tension clinging to my chest. I drank coffee on the balcony while the city moved gently around me. I spent evenings with people who didn't make me feel small. I no longer had to decode moods or walk on eggshells just to avoid emotional landmines. There was no more second-guessing my worth. I had stepped out of a war zone, and the silence that followed wasn't threatening. It was freedom. It didn't take long before she started dropping breadcrumbs on social media, subtle posts meant to grab my attention. A vague quote about losing someone who mattered, a photo from a trip we once took, a caption that hinted at heartbreak. But I didn't bite. I didn't even look twice. I had no desire to be pulled back into a story where I was only ever valued at the brink of loss. The truth is, Maya didn't expect the consequences of her own choices. She believed, perhaps genuinely, that I would always return, because I always had. But people change. Pain matures you in a way that comfort never can. Eventually, even the most patient heart reaches its limit. Mine had. That's when something shifted. She reached out one final time, weeks later. A long message. Thoughtful. Measured. She talked about how she had been reflecting on everything. She said she was trying to be better, that she was in therapy, that she understood now what she had done. She didn't beg, but she asked, quietly, hopefully, if there was any part of me still open to the idea of us. And for a moment, I sat with it. Not out of temptation, but out of recognition. She was finally doing the work. She was finally looking inward. But her growth didn't require my return, and my healing didn't require her approval. I didn't hate her. I didn't even resent her. But I had no intention of going back. Some doors once closed are meant to stay that way. I didn't reply. Because sometimes silence isn't a punishment. Sometimes it's the clearest boundary you can draw. A way of saying, I'm not angry. I'm just not available anymore. Not to the games, not to the guilt, not to the ghost of what we once were. She thought ignoring me gave her power. Now she knows what real silence feels like. The kind that comes when love dies quietly, without noise, without fanfare, and without ever turning around. I stopped texting her first. I stopped asking if she was okay. I stopped filling the silence with noise. She noticed, of course, tried to intensify the game, walked around me like I didn't exist, laughed a little too loudly on the phone when a friend called, took long showers and came out smelling like someone else's cologne, but I didn't react. The old Daniel would have begged for attention, broken down trying to understand. The new Daniel simply observed, quietly, calmly, not with bitterness but clarity.